Hello and welcome to Afternoons with ACEs, sponsored by the DC and Mid-Atlantic OATUG, InfoSemantics, and Creoal Consulting. My name is Catherine Oakford and I'm a marketing intern for Creoal. I'll be moderating today's conversation about the topic, where are the hackers looking for vulnerabilities, and are you doing all you can to keep your system safe? This webinar is the third in our series, Afternoons with ACEs. It's more than a webinar. The format is similar to a podcast and will be conversational in nature. All attendees are currently placed in listen-only mode and will remain that way throughout the session. There is a chat feature on the Zoom console on your screen. If at any time during the session you have a question, you can place it in the chat box and use your raise your hand feature to alert me to that question. I will transmit that question to our guests at the appropriate time so they may respond. Joining me today, we have Oracle Applications ACEs, Lee Briggs and Thomas Simkiss from Creoal. And our guest is Oracle Applications ACE Director, Susan Behn from InfoSemantics, a Cherry Road company. And with that, I will hand it off to them.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So as Catherine said, I'm Tom Simkiss from Creoal Consulting. I'm an Applications ACE. I've not yet gotten the Gold ACE that Susan has. We'll let Susan give her background in a second. This is our third one of these. We do try to have these a bit more conversational, but we do take questions. So if you are on the live chat now, as we discuss topics, if you have something that you'd like us to address, we will do our best to do so. Catherine will moderate for us. So Susan, I guess before we get introductions, we're going to talk a little bit about security and what hackers are looking for. But Lee and I and you were all out at the Ascend conference out in Vegas, which was the first in-person conference. There was one last year, I guess, at Miami, which was not super well attended, but this was the first in-person one I've been to since COVID hit. I'd love to get from you, how'd you think the conference went? Was it, as good as you hoped? Was it better? What'd you get out of it?
So I'll start. I think it was honestly better than I hoped. The attendance was pretty good. We had about 1,000 in person, and then there were a lot more. I don't remember what the count was for people that attended virtually. But it was the first event in a really long time that I thought we had really good attendance. I had, almost 50 people in my presentation, which, that hasn't happened since well before, COVID. So I was really, really pleased. And even though 1,000 people is a lot less than we had, pre-COVID when we had Collaborate, I think there's a lot of things going on there. I mean, if you remember, Collaborate was, Quest, OATUG, and IOUG. Well, now we have Ascend, which is OATUG and OHUG, and then Blueprint took on the Quest, IOUG, and I think it's just those two. So we ended up with kind of a split conference this year. Blueprint was the week before. I don't have their numbers. I'd be curious if anybody had those numbers. But I was really pleased with the smaller, intimate group. Everybody was at all the events. We got to talk to everybody at happy hours. I was really pleased. Okay. What'd y'all think?
So Lee, I'll let you go first because I got a kind of a follow-up question. So what'd you think?
So I agree. I was not expecting it to be as big as it was. As you said, there were 1,000 people out there. It felt weird going around some of the areas. Certainly in the exhibitors hall was weird because you're used to, the old days of having 6,000 to 7,000 people there and just being crammed in to having a couple of rows. And I get that exhibitors are nervous about going back. Everyone was worried about, I'm sending people there. Is everyone going to come back? Is it going to be a super spreader and everyone's down for the count? So I get that. I'm glad that Ascend were able to have professional camera people around. Like everyone there is a camera, you can see it, everything's projected out there. The audio is actually working well, as long as someone walked around with a microphone to actually answer questions. So it was great. I saw a lot of interesting panel, a lot of interesting discussions. I saw some, as you normally do, some where, this shouldn't have been picked, but it's something we learn for. And, we learn from. It's great to hear that we're hearing positive feedback about Ascend. We've heard feedback about the others and how I think in-person is coming back. I think that is the important part. You have to have some kind of virtual presence out there, some kind of, I can't get there, but I need to see this. And it's still finding that fine line between making it available to everyone, but still having at the core concept, getting together and learning something from you. We've been living with COVID for over 2 years now, and you have all these sessions where it's I'm in, I can see people in front of me, I can see Tom, I can see you, so I know that when I'm talking, I can look in your face and see that Tom is telling me to shut up and keep going forward. But you get that, and when you have the entire virtual thing where you don't see the other people, you have no idea what's going on. You don't get that instant feedback or okay, I missed that. Can you come back to that part? Yeah, it's a tricky part. Tom, when you jump in.
Well, what I found interesting is even before COVID, right? The in-person attendance at these conferences has dropped off pretty dramatically. I would say in the last like 7 years, like back in the good old days, not the good old days when the conference was held in Hawaii, but at least the good old days when it was the spring conference, we had the fall conference, and even an open world, like we used to get 7,000-8,000 people at that conference for just the Oracle user group, right? In the North American ones. And then when we kind of converted over to Collaborate, and it kept dropping. And I noticed that the last open world that I went to, right? So the first open world I went to, there had to be 60,000-70,000 people there, right? It was just mobbed. And then I went to San Francisco at the last open world in 2019, I guess, before COVID hit. There was nobody there. I mean, I say nobody. Right. I mean, I would say maybe 20. I mean, it just wasn't. Now, or it was a different conference because Oracle, again, at the old open worlds, it was like red. The whole city was red. It was like shock and awe. And I thought that was impressive. I always thought it was good to bring clients that just showed the power that Oracle had. But the last conference, the whole city was kind of like the Hummingbird theme, the new theme that's in the cloud. And it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't as impressive. There just weren't as many people there. And we talk about this on the education committee a lot. Like, you're getting less people because the information's available online. And it's so much easier to get. You don't have to travel, and people would rather spend their budgets on other things than travel. And then the converse to that would be, we started doing webinars again before COVID, like the year before COVID, we were doing a webinar a month at Lee's and I's company. And when we started, we were getting 80-90 people at a webinar, right? It was great. It was awesome. And then COVID hit, and everybody was doing webinars, and we weren't getting people to attend. I don't know if people are getting, they're getting webinared out, or the information that, they watch it. Like I know for these afternoons with ACES, our YouTube views are actually pretty good. We get a fair number of views for a session like this. It isn't like Katy Perry or something, but we get a fair number of views after the fact. Maybe people just want to consume it on their own. But I would say I thought the conference was pretty good. I was really happy with the attendance for what it was. I was happy with the sessions. The big thing, I know this is of interest to you, and we'll get to eBusiness Suite in a second. We did try to make a big deal of it on the education committee. That was the only in-person conference this year. If you want an EBS content, that was the only place you were going to get it. They're not going to be talking about EBS at Cloud World. They're talking about cloud, ironically enough, even though, you can run EBS in the cloud and you can kind of do all those things. It's a different kind of topic, which leads us into our topic for the day, which is kind of security. So, I guess I'd like you to, if you wouldn't mind, Susan, you did give your background. If you could just talk for 2 minutes about all the experience you have with EBS and roles in security and all the things that you've done. And then we can kind of point it towards what you're looking at now and what are some of the challenges you're seeing with securing applications access now that we're in a more, cloud world.
Right. Sure. So I started off many years ago. I'll just start with my Oracle experience, which started in the early 90s. And I started off more in a technical role, and then, moved into management, moved into functional, moved into more project management, engagement management, and here's where I sat. But having that technical background, I was always very interested in what I call the ATG parts of eBusiness Suite, which includes things that are common to all the modules. So it includes things like the security aspect, everything you think of with system administration, which is security, all the things with user management now, which is all about security, all the things with workflow and approvals, which is, approving things with the intent of providing security at a different level. So it's just been an area that I've been very, very interested in over the years. So, back to my background, started on EBS release 9. And of course, now we're on 12. And, you know, I think just seeing the changes, and I don't know if you want to go ahead and go into the next topic, but in terms of what's changed so dramatically over the last, 20 years and even 10 years is the focus on security. We used to not, when I first started working, we had root access. I always had root access to Unix. I mean,
Yeah.
we did what we needed to do. We made changes with SQL. We did queries. We didn't hide HR information. We all had access, the technical team had access to whatever they needed to have access to. I actually became concerned when I was working at, I guess I shouldn't specify the name, but let's just say a very, very large government organization. And I'm out there working, and because I'm a contractor out there, everybody on the team has access to all my information, including Social Security.
Mhm.
And so what's changed is, you don't get that anymore, and you shouldn't.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a lot of what I've seen from a security, and we can go more into that if you want to, but I'll kind of let you follow your agenda.
So let me jump. Let me
It's
jump in there.
free-flowing.
Yeah, this is just a chat. It's like we've met. You're almost presenting like this, like we prepare for it, and we do. So
we do.
You've had this experience for, let's say, 20 plus years, right?
Right.
And you came from a technical background. So we know everything is changing rapidly. Certainly in the last 10 years with Fusion, then cloud, then it's Cloud Fusion, Fusion Cloud, whatever it is, or it's SaaS, it's in the cloud somewhere. We have the dichotomy of trying to keep up with what's going on. And even if you're out of school, if you're out of school, you're already out of date with this kind of stuff.
Right.
But how do you find, let's go with the first part. When you started, everything was on-prem. How have you found moving from on-prem to a SaaS-based model where you're in someone's cloud? What have you been experienced with security around there?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. So on the positive side, when you move to SaaS, somebody else is taking care at least of some of your security, not all of it, but at least somebody else is taking care of the patching and some of the infrastructure around it. So you get a little bit of confidence with the fact that you have a company that's in theory taking care of that piece of it. Now you still have to do your configuration. So, we're just talking about those threats of people getting into your system, really. When you start talking about access to your data, and especially those internal threats, it depends on you configuring that, right? So those, whether it's on-prem or SaaS, those systems, SaaS being newer, probably has more configurations and more structure around security, but it still depends on you setting it up. I mean, you can give somebody a responsibility that has more access than they need. So I think what's gotten harder and harder about this, and in terms of keeping up with technology and keeping up, it's not just about keeping up with the technology, it's about keeping up with how to manage the technology around the rules and regulations. So what I mean by that is, let's look at, PHI and, just pure access to that information. You have to configure things to keep it private, right? And then of course, GDPR, you have to be able to delete that data. Think about the overhead on small organizations and their ability to shift to configure that and support that. It's incredibly difficult to even keep up with what they need to do and then turn around and configure it and update their systems to take advantage of those features. So I think that's part of what some of the hardest things about keeping up with technology is literally being able to have your company shift gears and adopt the technology, not so much learning about it, but actually adopting it. It doesn't happen overnight.
Okay, so let's have a look. And again, we're trying to we're trying to split our focus between EBS and cloud. Right. And one of the great things about cloud is everyone's on the same release, or at least everyone is on at least one of two of the most recent releases.
Right.
So whereas in EBS, you can be as up to date as you want. Tom and I are working with a client right now who are on 11i, and we're getting them to cloud. So they have done nothing for 20 years, I guess. Their support has been whatever it is. but they're stable. So they know the security they have on there because it's their security and nothing else has changed in there. So have you found your clients moving from doing upgrades? Are they keeping on track of everything? Are they trying to stay up to date with all the security patching out there? Or are they saying, no, you know what, I'm happy on 12 to whatever, I'm going to stay there and I'm going to make a huge jump later on?
Yeah, so that's an interesting topic, and we might spend a lot of time here. The biggest concern with people not adopting security patches, or those people that stay on 11i, or even people that don't have a plan to go to 12.2 going forward, is this notion that they think, I'm stable, it's not broken, I don't need to fix it, I'm secure. I think there's too much comfort in the fact that they think they're secure. And there's a couple of reasons I will say that. First of all, if you can't get security patches, what did that 11i customer do when Log4j came out? Did they just ignore it? I don't know. I don't expect you to have an answer, but the answer is there's nothing they could do. They can't get a patch. People on 12.1 are slowly or soon in 2 years going to be at that point. They can't get a patch for the next new threat that comes out. Yeah, you can get patches for existing. If the patch is already out there, you can get it. But if it's something new, I mean, the cybercrime has exponentially increased. So there's new threats out there every day, and you have to address those threats. And people that think their firewall is protecting them, I think are kind of missing the boat there, because the first time somebody walks in your door with an iPhone and plugs it into their laptop to charge, you've just exposed your systems. And the vast majority of threats come from inside. They come from that laptop you just connected. They come from your phone that you connected to your laptop that's connected to your VPN, that et cetera, et cetera. So this notion that I've had a closed system and nothing's changed with security, as soon as you open a browser, you've opened a door. So I think that's a very dangerous assumption that you're safe because nothing's changed, because things that you're connected to have changed.
Yeah. And it's interesting you kind of bring that up. We were talking before the podcast went online. You were talking about you have a Visions instance, but you have to be on your network to be able to get there.
Right.
I've been doing some work for a federal agency, just so we're clear. Federal, actually, Department of Defense. It's within their purview. So you're thinking, this is going to be super secure. And they said, yeah, you've got to have a laptop and you need an ID card, and the ID card plugs into the laptop. Awesome. I'm on board with that. It's Windows 7.
Yeah.
You start having that kind of get top marks for hardware for the policy you have out there. Windows 7. Seriously, you don't think anyone's done anything with Windows 7? It's insane.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I think, oh, well, my firewall's protecting me. Well, like I said, just keep telling yourself. I think if you look at the Gartner information, I think 60 to 70% of your breaches come from the inside. They're already inside your firewall. So what makes you think you're secure?
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand that logic. I think people tend to just want to bury their head in the sand. Because when we implemented 11i, security wasn't a big deal. And let me bring something else up. I was going to bring this up later, but we're conversational. I think it's a good time to bring this up. I've asked a couple of different, Cherry Grade's a hosting company. So obviously we're very, very security conscious. You would not believe the training that we go through. But the reason for that is because of our cybersecurity insurance. They are driving it. So I'll ask my clients, have you checked your cybersecurity? Are they requiring, what do they think about you not upgrading and not having security patches? And I get the deer in the headlights stare, because the CIO and the IT director haven't even thought about it. And that is the first thing anybody on this call should call somebody in their organization and say, what does our cybersecurity insurance require us to be doing to be able to place a claim if we get hit?
Yep.
And they probably don't know the answer, because the big organizations, that I've asked don't have an answer. Oh, I haven't thought about that. Well, that's something, the first thing you should think about that, because the requirements are very high.
And it's one of those calls you want to have now when you don't need to have the call, as
Right.
opposed to when you need to have that call,
Right.
it's going to be a problem.
Right. When people find out is when they make a claim and then they can't get anything done, you know, and I mean, it's like there's a ton of very high profile security breaches. Anybody can research them. I mean, the one from Target, didn't that come through the AC system that was on the internet? How many of us have our AC controller on the internet? I do.
Yeah.
How many do you think are on the internet of these organizations that think that they're safe? I mean, that's how they got in. So
Yeah.
it's pretty
Well,
scary out there, to be
There's
honest.
a meme on Facebook a lot, right? For those that still use Facebook, like
I still do.
it's like I still do too, but we're old. But how people think hackers work. And it's like some guy with like all these computers, and then it's like how hackers really work, and it's people filling in, taking these quizzes. Like what's your favorite food, or what was your mom's maiden name, or
I was going to bring that
what was your
up.
first concert, and that's how people
Why
get
do
their
people
information.
answer those?
I don't know.
Do
I
they
don't
not
know.
realize there are hackers out there putting together databases with your answers that they sell.
Absolutely. Yep,
And
without
they
a doubt.
know your first concert. They know your mother's middle name. They know your favorite color. They know.
See, and the one, again, we're on this topic, so it's kind of off topic, on topic, off topic. But the part I always love is you actually give a real answer. Like, what is your mother's maiden name? I'm not going to say it's Smith, just so we're clear. It's not Smith. I'm not going to say it's Smith. I'm going to say, red Toyota Camry, because it doesn't matter if it's right. It matters that I know what it is.
You know the answer. Yes.
So as long as I've got that answer, and again, this is poor Gerald who's parked out in the parking lot, and Tom knows who this is. If I say red Toyota Camry, that's what it is. We can give that away, but I digress.
But that's true. I mean, I think people haven't really. I start to wonder if people are getting numb to it because we've talked about security and passwords so much. People just kind of roll their eyes and say, yeah. I mean, I just convinced, I'm not even going to tell you who it is. Might be somebody that lives with me. So there's your hint. I just finally convinced my family member to put a password on their phone. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm sorry, it's inconvenient to type in that number and you don't have facial recognition because you don't want to get an iPhone. I'm sorry. Put the number on your phone. Do you know how much information is in there and all your passwords? And
it's okay, just write the password down and put it on a yellow post-it on the phone.
Yeah,
that's all you
let's
need.
do that too. And then what do y'all think about these password vaults? I mean, aren't you relying on their system being secure?
You are. Well, it's funny, and you shouldn't do it. And there's so many articles about it. But I use the password manager in Chrome and in Explorer. I use it. It's convenient, but if somebody gets a hold of your account, all your passwords are right there.
Well, let me tell you the scariest thing I learned in our security training this past year, and we have to do it every year. And I will say we have some of the best security training that's out there. It's not even really incredibly boring like most of them are. But anyway, I digress. The point that I'm trying to make, and I had no idea that this happened. If you get a Zoom meeting request, like we're on Zoom now, and it's from somebody you don't know and you accept it, what do you think it's sending in that acceptance email? What it's sending is your password keychain file. If it's a hacker, that's how they get your passwords, because you've accepted a Zoom meeting from some company that you didn't know. Hey, get on this Zoom meeting and, watch the World Series for free. Yeah, don't do that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that scared me because literally, and now I want to go look at Outlook and make sure, how people ask for read receipts and things like that. Are we exposed by sending a read receipt? I would never allow Outlook to send that without you approving that. Make sure it's not set up to send them automatically, because that's kind of scary, isn't it?
Yep.
And I don't know the answer. I don't know if there's exposure there or not, but somebody's probably going to figure out how to hack it. They've hacked the Zoom replies, which are through your email, right?
Yeah.
So here's a question for you. This is an implementation question, because I have this debate. So one of our brethren that we see with Ascend a lot does role security, and he started out doing EBS, and he's got a full company around it, and he does it in cloud a lot. And he and I always have spirited debates on when you go live, I believe when you go live, I'll pick on EBS, right? Like when we used to go live with EBS, even complicated clients, I gave everybody everything. I didn't give the worst thing you can do is go live and you're so secure that because nobody ever tested as much as they should, and they can't do their friggin' jobs. Right. Like
you can't do that anymore.
Back in the olden days, it was 11i. You just add somebody. You didn't need to do anything. You didn't need to bounce Apache. We truly try to be super secure, but I really, even in the cloud, I really take those first 3 months. I don't want to say it's a wild west, but I give people pretty much everything. I got to know that they can do their jobs. Now, if we're doing these large government jobs where we get time to do security, then we do these exercises where we look at the roles that you need and we look at the privileges, and that's important. I think it's good, but I'd like to know from a security standpoint, as far as like the database and the things that your area covers, like what's your approach to that? Meaning Susan's approach. You're not speaking as a member on behalf of your company. This is Susan's opinion.
Yeah, well, I think there's an IT team that is allowed a certain amount of privilege because they need to have that privilege to do their job. So, they need access. It doesn't mean they need access to root. So one of our approaches, or my recommended approach, is, for example, you give the DBA access to the back end, but not the front end. Make sure there's a sysadmin for the front end. So at least it has to have 2 people really to, do a whole lot of damage. It takes 2. You can't do it with just 1, and I mean, you can, but you should have, the other thing you should have is an approval process, or at least auditing or tracking of anything that's, anytime you grant access to a privileged, what I call a privileged responsibility, like system administrator or anything along those lines, even a super user, it should be tracked and audited, or ideally it should be done with an approval. So I think that's one of the strategies that you have to roll out from the beginning, and you just have to take the time. But I'll tell you some scary things, particularly with EBS, that I don't see people do is, just run the standard security reports and check to see what's at the back end, what databases passwords are out there set to the default. We all know it's out of the box. It's GL, AP, et cetera. And I think one thing that people don't realize over the years, every time you install even a dot release, you might get some new application stubbed in that has a database account. And guess what the password's going to be? It's going to be the password for that schema. And there's reports you can run that will tell you that. So I used to do a lot of security assessments. And the first thing we did was run those security reports, or run a script and look for that stuff. And I have never been to a client that I didn't find at least 5. Never in my life. And I can't tell you how many clients still have sysadmin set to sysadmin, and their entire IT department logs in as sysadmin to do all their configurations. So there's no auditing.
Well, that's with that on implementations, right? So even in cloud, you pay by users, and I'm pretty adamant. Like when we set the initial user up, you set it up, but then I want my consultants with their own account. I want them doing configurations under their own account. I want to know who did something and who did what.
Exactly.
And I don't want you sharing passwords because you can say you didn't do it. And that's just important. Back in the olden days, I did the whole system configuration as sysadmin. I never thought about it. It was no big deal. But like stuff like that, it's important, and you don't always think about it.
One of the things to actually, to jump on there as well, it's not just the implementation. The implementation, I care about who set it up, but when you actually get live, now, especially in a cloud environment where Oracle can run a script at any time to see where you're in compliance and know you've used 17 licenses, you paid for 10 of them. Now you've got to get down to, if I'm supporting you, am I supporting you as Lee? Am I supporting you as my company name? So anyone who's on my support desk is using my company name. So that's one license. Where do you fall on that? Because if you're expecting, certainly some of these smaller companies where I have 10 financials users, if I've got to use 3 of them to support your prod system, it's one of those things you've got to kind of traverse as you go through this.
Yeah, that's a good point. That doesn't happen as much. Well, not as much in EBS. You would think that Oracle would have some kind of provision for the support team. but apparently they don't. So
But
that's
honestly, that can be client by client. Tom and I have a couple of clients who we provide support for. One of them, the sales team, were absolutely, we're totally on board with you having support. We're not going to even count those licenses.
right.
And the other
Yeah.
one was like, you're over your limit now. I want some of that money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I think as ACEs or as leaders with the user group, that maybe we should use the power of the user group to address that situation. Not being a cloud person, honestly, I didn't really even think about that, but that is a big issue that you do need to follow segregation of duty rules within your support as much as possible. Although it's really not segregation of duties. You can get an exception for that, but it's more, you do need individual people. You need to track who's doing what from an auditing standpoint.
Yeah.
It's really that issue. And your auditors are going to flag you if you don't do that. If you have generic accounts, that's going to be an audit flag.
Sure.
They're going to mark that as a violation. I can tell you right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done IT audits,
Yeah.
for the government in the past, and they're going to flag that.
The only ones that we have, again, this is just like, again, it's a Tom Simkiss and Lee Briggs approach. Like in cloud, I did this in EBS too. Like there's just a bunch of jobs that you have to run, like create accounting. Like I don't want that running every day under a named user, because they're going to get all the reports and everything else. So
those you do create a common user for that.
I would create a process user, and the sysadmin had the password, and it followed the same password rules. You got to change the password every 90 days or whatever it was. But again, you run into that problem as well. Again, in cloud, that burns a user. It burns a user, and it's not ideal. And you got to balance security. Again, I always have these discussions. You got to balance security with what makes sense, and you also have to balance it again. Like how secure do you have to be? I mean, like, so.
Well, in a situation like that, you have to rely on your auditing. So. And your approval process. So if you're forced to not burn a user and forced to set up those common jobs as like a sysadmin type user, there should be at least an approval process or an audit trail where that sysadmin, I mean, you could create something where you at least track in an approval process the details behind who put that in, just with some text fields. The other thing you could do, at least on the EBS side, is you can set up access to view those jobs through user management. I mean, there's through concurrent requests, there's even a security wizard where you can give access to whoever needs to see it to those jobs. So I won't go into the details there, but you can give access and use sysadmin for that purpose. I don't really like the idea of using sysadmin, because anytime you give somebody access to log into sysadmin, then that's, a huge security breach as it is. But in a smaller organization, you could have a single person creating all those jobs. But when you get to big distributed organizations, it's harder to do that. I mean,
it is. Yeah.
Most companies are trying to, have distributed systems, at least by country. We're all global organizations now, especially if you're multi-language. You can't have people in the US setting up your Chinese reports in the Chinese language. I mean, that would be hard, right? So
we had process users. We had process users by region. We did a large rollout for I won't say the company name, but a large manufacturer based in Asia, and we did a rollout for them in APAC, and then we did a rollout for them in EMEA, and then we finished it in the States. We actually did last. And the way that they wanted things to run, they had really good DBAs, so they knew how to timestamp the jobs so that it was appropriate, right? So that it wasn't based upon the timestamp on the database. It was actually based upon the timestamp of where the job was originated from.
Right.
And, that was a big deal for forever, right? I mean, back not that long ago, if you had a centralized database, it was the timestamp where the database was, and it created counting issues, all those other jazz. But what we had to do for them is we had to have concurrent jobs running, at APAC at midnight in APAC. So it was running the next day for them, which was obviously whatever time it was here in the States. We had to have 3 concurrent users. Now, we could have done it with one and just different jobs. They wanted them under different regional users, so that if something went sideways, they weren't looking at the company's worth of concurrent jobs. They were only looking at their regions. And it made all the sense in the world. And I think that, that those are, not, I don't know if they're best practices or not, but those are things you got to be cognizant of, is when you're doing large global organizations, what makes the most sense I guess I'll say it differently. What makes the most sense from a security standpoint doesn't always make the most practical sense. Right. You gotta balance those things out, that's important. I guess that's part of our jobs is consultants, right?
Yeah. And I think we started off, it's kind of interesting. We're going down this road. We started off talking about how things have changed over the last 20 years. And I think one of the other big changes is this global concept, these global organizations. 20 years ago, we didn't have very many of them. And if we did, they had their own system. I mean, we didn't, if you remember back to EBS 9, I mean, you had to create separate instances of GL to have two orgs anyway, right? Does anybody remember those days?
I will take your word for that one. I didn't get on
there
EBS
was no
until
such thing as
10.7.
Yeah. If you had multiple organizations, you had 2 installs of GL and 2 installs of AP, 2 install. Yeah. That was back in release 9.
Okay. I do remember Smart Client. So
this was before Smart Client.
My first use of EBS was I actually wasn't a consultant, I was a staff accountant, and we put Oracle in, and we had Smart Client, but it was only, they only had it for like GL. I want to say AR, but I can't remember. But AP was still character based, right? So it was a mixed mode install. It was the good old days.
Yeah, like there was no concept of multiple organizations, or multiple currencies. So we had Canada in one instance and US in another instance, effectively. But it wasn't like a complete instance. It was like multiple installs of GL.
Yeah.
Multiple installs of it. It was kind of hard to explain. It was really weird.
So we were supposed to talk about it. We really didn't, I guess. And this is not really on the topic, but you've been consulting a long time. Leigh and I've been consulting a long time. Do you think the job is easier now than it used to be because of all the technology and the remote stuff, or do you think it's harder, or do you think it's the same?
I think it's harder because things in general are just more complex, and it's harder because of the things that we've talked about, like the regulations. So you have to think about more things. It's harder because of cybersecurity is more prevalent. And honestly, what's made it harder is the internet. I mean, the internet's made it easier in some cases, but from a security standpoint, it's made it harder because you have to protect yourselves. And you have to do more to make sure that that protection exists. So from that standpoint, it's harder. Like I said, it's just more complex. Just think about going to the conferences. I actually missed the days that I had to go to the, payphone and call into the office once a day. And I was going to talk about this earlier. I think we might get a little bit of maybe an increase in attendance, maybe, next year, because I think people have realized they miss that personal connection. And the other thing that is happening with webinars, with the webinar burnout, is people on webinars are multitasking. You're only half listening. And so you get to the end, and I do this. I get to the end of their webinar. It's like, oh crap, I got to go back and review all the slides, and I have no idea what he said in relationships. So I'm trying to read the slides and understand, and I've completely missed out. I got to go back and re-listen to it, and then I don't have time. At least if I go to an event, my company knows I'm busy. I'm busy for a day or two, or at least for that hour of that presentation. So I feel like you get more focus and you get more out of it than listening to a webinar. And I think people are starting to realize that. I mean, they realize that. Just look at how the kids have not adapted to remote learning at school. Right. It's not any different with adults. I mean, I think we need that time to focus, and we need to be on site sometimes to focus.
And that's one of the things that Tom and I have, we've found, and I'm sure your team's found it as well. You move to COVID where it's all going to be remote, and we've all had hopefully successful implementations during COVID where you don't go on site. You start going through I know what I have to be on site for. I can remember, again, of the three of us, I think I have the least consulting experience with 20 years. So I can remember my first gig, I was on site Monday through Friday. I was there. The client wanted me there. You're doing it. And then it started getting to, okay, well, you can VPN in, so come 4 days a week and worry about the last day. And you get to COVID where you're not on site at all, but you still have to be there. You have to be able to look someone in the eye. You have to be able to go through a enterprise design session and talk about chart of accounts or whatever. and be able to look around the room and say, yeah, that guy over there did not get it. I can see why he would not get it. And if you're presenting like we are right now, we've got five cameras up right now. I can look at three of us, but the other two, I have no clue what's going on. Now, again, it's deliberate on this session, but it's the same kind of thing. No, I don't need my camera. Oh, I'm having camera issues. Yeah, of course you are. You're at the beach.
Yeah.
We're cool with it. But it's that kind of thing.
So one of the things that I in response to that, I think it's easy for the consultants to work remote because we know what we need to do. And for the most part, if we're working on a project, we're working on a project. I think the bigger gap is actually with the client. And the reason I say that is because the vast majority of companies do not dedicate people to a project. So they're doing their day job and they're doing this project on the side. And it's really, really hard to get their attention because like, okay, if I'm the AP manager, I'm doing AP stuff, I'm doing collections, I'm dealing with my regular job. So if you are not physically there, getting the information you need from the client and getting their attention is what makes projects, I think, working remote more difficult. I don't think it's the consultants. I think it's getting the information from the client. And that's not that the client's bad. That's not, a reflection on anything that they're doing wrong. They're just busy. Everybody's busy. They're multitasking. And if you don't have them captured in a room, it's just like what we were talking about on those webinars. They're doing 3 things at one time and they've had, how many clients have you been at that you get in a meeting and say, we talked about that last time. Do you not remember that decision that was made? Even though I wrote it down, did you not read the meeting notes? It's like you just want to pull your hair out because you're saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. And they're not stupid. They're just being overworked. It's just.
There's a couple interesting things. And unfortunately, for this panel, we're all of the same kind of generation, right? I'd like to think we're skewed, but then I talk to the people that work for me and I hear a lot of things that I believe. Like, I was on LinkedIn, which is good and it's bad. A couple of weeks ago, somebody made a post and she made a big deal about the fact, how great remote work was and such flexibility. It's the greatest thing in the world. And she's like super employed because she was able to cook dinner, a complete dinner for her family while taking a conference call. And, I actually commented on it. I'm like,
I do that sometimes.
If you're able to cook a complete dinner, right, when you're on a conference call, how important are you to the conference call?
Yeah.
Right? Because
it depends on what I'm doing. It depends on what that dinner is. Too. If I'm just doing kind of the normal, making stuff I've made over and over again. Yeah, I can be on a conference call and be multitasking at the same time. But you get to a point you can't do that every day.
Right. And how focused are you on either one or the other? If you're making burgers, you're all right. But if you're making Gordon Ramsay's filet mignon or something, it's probably not going to be as good. And how much value did you add to the meeting? And
here's the thing I run into. So usually I'm doing like prep and I take my phone off mute and then somebody says, okay, what is that banging? And I'm chopping onions.
Yeah.
It's like,
a guy,
I'm turning the water on and washing my hand. You can't do it you can do it, but you can't do it every day. You can't make that a daily activity. Can you do it occasionally? Yes. Do you have some flexibility? Yes. If you don't control that, do you let it get out of hand where you're only half focusing on both your home job and your work job? That's what ends up happening because you can let it get away from you.
Yeah, you can. But the other thing that I'm noticing is that we have a lot of associates here at Creoal. That's kind of our model, whereas we bring in people that have a couple years experience and they do the configurations and, it's really a good model. But Lee and I come into the office quite a bit. And even though we don't have to, we can work remote, but we come together and invariably speaking, at least 2 or 3 times a week, we'll be working on something and we'll be like, aha, and we like whiteboard something real quick and we solve a problem that I'm not telling you couldn't do it via Teams or Zoom because you can. You've got the tools there to do it, but it's not quite as organic and it just seems to work better. And, a lot of the associates we have, they're like 21, 22, 23, 24 years old. And they're telling me like, was it okay if we come into the office? Like we get more out of it, more together. I'm like, absolutely. I'm not going to make you, the company that I work for, we don't force people to come into the office. It's not our policy. But I'm seeing more and more some of the people that are coming up, they recognize that you just get a little bit more out of working together. Doesn't mean you can't work remote for a lot of things, but there's just value.
I agree. I
And
agree.
it's-
I'd rather be in an office. I'd rather be on site. I'd rather have a client that allows us to be on site. The clients, COVID is an exception, but even before COVID, those clients would say, oh, you can do it remote. And I'm trying to manage my team remote.
Yep.
I prefer not to.
And
Yeah.
it's weird.
I don't know what they're doing.
It's weird. We've had this conversation for 45 minutes, and we started off with on-site at a conference, and we've come all the way back to the same thing. Again, it's hitting a different topic, but we're back on the same thing. Just getting more out of meeting folks, meeting folks, having these kind of discussions where you just get that you just overhear something that's going on in another room. It's like, wait, what was that? I can help with that, or I'm having that same issue too. Let's figure it out.
Well, one of our colleagues, he's on the line as an attendee, Doug Volz, he's the head of the manufacturing SIG and the costing SIG. He makes a comment quite frequently, and Hans, who's on the multinational SIG with me, Hans Colby, the value of the conferences, for me at least, is it's almost rarely in the sessions. I don't get a ton out of those, but the conversations with the people in between sessions, that I get a ton of value at, right?
Right.
Like
I agree.
just spurring moment stuff, you bump into somebody, and that's not going to happen on a Zoom. It's not going to happen. It's not right. It's not wrong. It just simply is. Like those conversations that you have in the hallway, walk into one session, you can get a lot of value out of that.
Right. I agree. And getting to know somebody face to face too, makes it easier, or makes it more comfortable to pick up the phone or write an email. Hey, it was good talking to you at Ascend. I have a question for you about something you were asking about or talking about, or we talked about. I just think it makes it, having that personal connection makes it easier to follow up via phone, via email, whatever. So I think people want to get back to those connections. And what I try to encourage my clients is, it's not just the connections with consultants. Go sit in those sessions and get to know the other companies that are doing the same thing you are. And ask them, how'd you solve this problem? They can get a lot of value out of that. So I think there's a lot of value in that. So
you're going to be going to Vegas for Cloud World? I know it's not your bag, but I figured I would ask.
Probably not. No, but coming up, ECO in November, it'll be really interesting to see East Coast Oracle User Group, how many people, last year we were still in the middle of COVID when they did it, so the numbers weren't high. It'll be interesting to see, several events are coming up in the fall, to see how the attendance is with those events.
Yeah, I think it'll depend on how this next variant on the variant does as well. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to, if I never go to Vegas again in my life, I will be fine.
But Tom, it's okay. Next year. It's the Ascend is going to be in Vegas. In the spring. Early summer.
It's in Orlando.
It's in Orlando next year.
It's in Orlando in June.
That's right. Orlando in June, which is bearable, and Cloud World is going to be in Vegas in October. That middle of the desert is going to be fine.
I think actually, if I remember correctly, I think October in Vegas is pretty nice. I know it's really nice in San Francisco. I know Oracle probably won't be going back there anytime soon.
Okay. Yeah, it's just too expensive.
Yeah, it is. It's just too expensive. Conferences it is a lot of money. I get it. To send people to those things, but it's pretty interesting. So we had kind of had, went full gamut. And really,
we've been all around the world.
It is nice to connect with everybody again. So we had, we took off last month because we were all in Las Vegas. We had Deborah Lilly on with our second one. We started off with Mohan. Deborah is always a trip, by the way. I love talking to Deborah.
Yep. It was good to see her in Vegas.
Yeah, it really was. Do
we have any questions from the audience?
We did not, actually.
I've been checking the chat window. I'm hoping I'm recognizing a lot of names of the attendees. It's been great that I think people are either multitasking and not actually paying attention. If so, we know who you are, and we've got your names. But I think we're covering a lot of stuff. Certainly, we've got some teasers out there. I know, Susan, you were saying you have that ability to kind of see other people's outputs, and you're not going to say how to do it. Again, completely on board with that. What we call the professional business a teaser. If people are interested in that kind of thing, everyone is everyone is getting everyone's contact information, so we can certainly do that. But I think folks are I'm hoping are learning stuff.
Yeah, I will throw out one recommendation for any EBS users out there. Michael Barone did a session on security and goes through a lot of things a lot of those reports I was talking about in EBS, and does a really good presentation. I would recommend anybody go out there and download his presentation on security. It's really excellent. He's another Oracle ace. So yeah, I think a lot of the things we've talked about, you'll find some good content there and good tips. So and give him a plug. One that he doesn't even work with me.
I say the one that I will actually shamelessly plug. I think it's online. It's from a couple of years ago. Susan and I actually did a presentation on security, but comparing cloud and EBS. So Susan went through user maintenance and all the roles we had up there. I did the cloud version of it. So we kind of talked through that. And for any folks who are going through that kind of, looking to migrate transition into a cloud world, again, this isn't I'm trying to take credit for it. I'm actually giving credit to Susan. She did the EBS side. I think that was a good one as well.
We do have one question, but before we go through that, Kelly, I'll let you ask in a second. So we gave Deborah a chance to kind of where she's playing in the next couple of months. So she was going to do a bunch of sessions. So where will you be performing in the next couple of months, Susan? So where can people catch the show on the road?
Catch the show on the road. Well, the next one I have on my schedule is Dallas Oracle User Group. So anyone local to Dallas or Dallas area, there's an in-person event October 7th. I don't know if they have it on the website yet, but it'll be on the website in the next week or two. I will likely be at East Coast Oracle User Group in November. They always look forward to going to Raleigh in November. And those are the two on my agenda at the moment.
Awesome. I have to say, so we do have a question. Kelly's going to ask it, but someone is a coward.
Yes, the questions are keeping me on my toes. Anonymous would like to know if you can include a recipe with the next webinar so they can cook while they are listening.
Absolutely. We'll make it something simple so that you can actually do it and pay attention.
And then I think we should have Tom's Gordon Ramsay's filet mignon. I don't know what Gordon Ramsay does there.
We do have a real question from Jason. He asked regarding quarterly patches. What is a general guideline for the type and level of testing, and also how quickly can you generally recommend getting these installed after release?
I can answer that. So, I'll give you my opinion. So quarterly patches, when we're talking about CPUs, PSUs, those are really a lot of times focused on security. You can run what's called an EBS patch wizard and see what those things are touching. But for the most part, those patches are things that if we're talking about the CPUs and the PSUs, you need to do what I'd call database level testing. So you need to pay attention to things like security. Not security, performance, anything that's going to touch performance. So you need to run some of your batch processes and just do kind of a sanity check. I do what I would call smoke testing, which means, run through, create an invoice, create a supplier, run through a basic, create accounting, those types of things. I would not do full regression testing for every one of those because I think it's in your best interest to get those applied as soon as you can for security reasons. So I try to encourage customers to apply those within the first 60 days if possible. And if not, just put together, everyone should have effectively, I'm a big project manager person. So I encourage you to have a project plan for patching and for other maintenance items for production support. I mean, put it all in a project plan and put it on the calendar. Don't just wait till you get it and say, oh, when are we going to do this? You should have an ongoing maintenance, whether it's a plan, a calendar, however you want to manage that, so that your management team knows, I'm always going to have this quarterly patching the third weekend of every, quarter type of thing. So, people know when to expect it.
So Susan, let me follow on from that a little bit, right? So again, we might be going over time, but I think this one's important. So you're doing this patching. Obviously, we're doing it in not prod first, but we want to test this out.
Right.
Are you running it through multiple non-prod instances? So a lot of clients will have three instances, right? We'll get rid of prod, screw that for the time being. That one's going to be last. So you have a test, which is normally I don't want to say disaster recovery, but something broke in prod. I'm going to do something in test to see what's going on. And you have a dev where you're doing new ongoing projects or whatever, and you migrate to promote up. Are you going to do this quarterly? Are you advocating doing this quarterly testing in dev just to see what it does? Then
absolutely. I mean, I would assume you'd be following your dev test prod migration process. Ideally, if you have a fourth instance, most DBAs like to do a patch instance first, and the only reason to apply it in what's called a patch instance is just to make sure the patch isn't broken.
Right.
And doesn't bring your system down, because most of the time you have developers that are trying to work, you have people trying to test, those instances are active, and you don't want to debug the patch in your development instance, if you have something going on there. So, if you have a patch instance, test it there first just to make sure the patch will install without breaking. And then you go through your normal cycle. You don't do any testing in your patch instance.
Right.
That's, like I
make
said,
sure you comply.
It's just a test instance. You do it in test instance. It's fine.
Yeah.
So what we'll do
No,
is
you can't skip dev. You got to go dev test prod. That's a migration path. If not more. Some companies have dev test QA prod, but at a minimum, it'd be dev test prod.
And just so we're clear, I knew the answer. That was leading a little bit, but I wanted to make sure the folks listening in have kind of got that concept. But no, I've tested it.
Absolutely.
I'm going live.
Absolutely.
So we're supposed to talk about taxes next month with Andrew Bonet. Still trying to get that finalized, but that's our preview. I will have a recipe for beef Wellington anonymous. We'll make sure we put an ingredients list out ahead of time so you can prep your duplex.
I have a turkey on the smoker. Does that count?
That sure does. It absolutely does. If we don't have anything else, Susan, it's always a pleasure. It was so great to see you out in Vegas.
Good to see you guys.
And hopefully I will catch you in an in-person event time soon. Folks, thanks for attending. This will be posted on YouTube within the next little bit. And I said the goal is to get this live on a podcast or available for podcast probably by 2023. So if you like anything, please make sure you comment on the YouTube channel. And if there's a comment or a topic that you'd like discussed with one of our friends of ACES, let us know. And other than that, have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks so much, Susan.
Bye.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, everyone.